And we're joined tonight by the Sunday Times columnist Matthew Syed and journalist and author Ella Whelan. Good evening again. Matthew, why don't we start with American politics? The Sunday Telegraph reporting that the Prime Minister's had fulsome praise for Donald Trump. Not recently, this goes back to 2017, I think.
Yeah, this won't be particularly useful for Boris Johnson. The British public has a very negative view of Donald Trump, and these remarks are slightly embarrassing. But what's clear is that this US presidential election, I mean, all presidential elections are very important, not just in America, but for the wider world. This one of huge significance. And it's a remarkable. I looked at the odds before coming on. Trump is now even money favourite on the betting markets. Biden 20 to 19 against. It's on an absolute knife edge.
That's not what the polls are saying, though, isn't it? The polls are different.
The polls, yes, are very different for the betting markets. The betting markets got it wrong last time as well, but not by as big a margin, of course, as the polls. But this is an extremely difficult one to call. Trump, I think, is being helped hugely, enormously, by the violence and protest in the inner cities, wants this to be a law and order election. Joe Biden, his Democratic opponent, wants to focus the public's attention on Trump's handling of COVID. I do think the fact that these two candidates are representing the two parties indicates the political decay in the United States. I mean, I certainly want Biden to win, but I don't think he's the best Democratic candidate that we've seen in recent decades. But the fact that Trump has been such a danger to the institutions of the United States, to the rule of law, I think means that most people around the world will be hoping for a Biden victory.
Ella, it's very interesting, isn't it, the campaign at the moment? Who do you think is running the better campaign? Because certainly Trump, the themes that he's going on, China, as Matthew said, law and order, the economy, free speech, they all seem to be resonating, don't they?
Well, this is it. In many ways, it's different from 2016, but a lot of the time it does feel like a rerun, particularly because the Democrats have, since that 2016 election, have carried on their attempts to basically take down Trump on a personal basis, say that he's, use the kind of extend the deplorables argument, rather than going in for the kind of really meaty aspects of where he's vulnerable in terms of policy, in terms of his ability to act on the world stage. I mean, it's fascinating that Johnson has said that he's, made America great again and has got them back and engaged in the world, because the kind of one objective criticism that everyone can make of Trump is that his unpredictableness and his sort of shooting from the hip tactics don't do well in terms of global politics, and it's not a good kind of shake-up than he's doing, storming out of press conferences and saying ridiculous things about China. But in terms of Biden and Trump, I mean, I'm not so sure that everyone's hoping that Biden wins, because as much as Trump is has odious politics to me, and some of the speeches that were given at the Republican National Convention prove how backward him and his ideas and his supporters' ideas are. But if Biden wins, it doesn't solve anything, because I think for many Americans, what that means is it's proof that the establishment is back and clamped down its control. Because for me, Biden is no different to Clinton, no different to Obama, no different to the kind of stagnation that's been happening in the Democrat Party for such a long period of time. The key point is that whether either of these strange individuals, Biden or Trump, wins, it's going to be contested. And this is not the end of the deep divisions in American politics. They go much, much deeper and much further than these two sort of very strange, almost zombie-like figures. Now, Biden sort of unable to get out of his basement for long periods of time, Trump hiding away in the White House. It's strange and dangerous times in America, I think.
OK, well, let's talk about events back here at home. Why don't you kick us off with this, Matthew? Front of the Sunday Times. Extension rebellion, MPs unite in defence of free speech. This all comes after about 3 million papers were stopped from hitting the newsstands this morning.
Yeah, I think it's worth remembering that by blockading the print works that sends newspapers out to newsagents up and down the country, they were interfering with the livelihoods of small businesses, people who are trying to support their families, older readers who tend to engage with newspapers through print rather than the online editions. So I'm glad MPs have come out in unanimity to condemn these actions because they were illegal. They interfere with the proper functioning of democracy when they stop newspapers which scrutinise authority from doing their job. I'm glad there were arrests. I would like the police to have been slightly more proactive, but I do think that these Extinction Rebellion, I mean, even in their own terms, they will have inflamed sentiment against their own cause.
Have they got a point, Matthew, that papers have become a bit complacent about the threat to the climate?
Well, it depends on which paper you look at. So, I mean, there is the irony here is that The Sun, which is one of the main targets of the activists, carried a full-page op-ed by David Attenborough, which will not have been read by people because of their actions. So I think that it's a nuanced picture. There are different views on climate change. I think there isn't a single literate person in this country who has not been exposed to the arguments of those who think we should be more strenuous in the way we deal with climate change. I just think that obfuscates what is an illegal act and one that damages our society.
Tougher laws needed, Ella?
Well, let's get one thing straight. Extinction Rebellion does not hold and does not have authority over the truth and the climate as they claim. They are an extremist group in terms of they are the views that they put forward about basically putting a stop to life as we know it are not only elitist, they're wildly out of touch with the average working person's lived experience. They do not speak for the masses, and so they have no right to go around claiming that they have the authority on the truth. Got incredibly reactionary politics from my point of view. But, and it pains me to defend them, but sometimes you do have to defend people who you politically absolutely do not agree with. I'm worried about the government coming in on a defense of free speech under the guise of imposing new laws, because doing things like calling them an organised crime group, cracking down on protests by limiting where and when they can protest, and inevitably then where and when anyone else can protest, is a worrying thing, because, protest is no good unless it disrupts. It's always going to upset someone, and that's what makes it successful. And I'm very worried about us creating a situation in which the only place you can protest is, in a corner of Hyde Park designated by the police on a sunny afternoon from 2 till 3. That is not a fair means of allowing people the freedom to protest. So we have to do two things at this. Yeah.
But they were breaking the law, the existing law. There were a whole number of arrests, so they were breaking the existing law. So what they were doing, you say that there's a right to disrupt. There is no right. What they were doing broke the law.
Yeah, well, but this is the key point, isn't it? I mean, and I completely agree with you, Matthew, that the police were pathetic. I mean, you didn't say that, but I'm saying it. The police were pathetic, standing and assessing and observing for hours. I'm not a fan of police crackdown, but this was bamboo scaffolding. Just go in and arrest them if that's what you want to do. It's already illegal. You can't hold an MP hostage while they're going to try and vote. That's kidnapping. We already have laws, quite stringent laws in place in terms of keeping public order and public peace. That's fine. You might want to have a debate about that. But the idea of bringing in further law to clamp down on protests, and across the papers, this is framed as something that's both a protection of democracy via a clampdown on protest. That can't exist. That isn't protecting democracy by clamping down on protest.
The papers are always going to go with that line, though, aren't they? After what happened in the early hours of this morning. Listen, we've only got a minute left, but I do want to talk about this story very quickly. It's on the front of the Mail. This time we won't blink. Just give us the headline, Matthew, and then we'll get Ella's view as well.
Yeah. So the chief Brexit negotiator, Lord Frost, David Frost, is saying one of the problems with the Theresa May premiership was that she would make threats that were not credible. And he is saying to the EU via this front page story that if we don't get what we want or some element of what we want, we will walk away. And that, he thinks, will enable the UK government to get the deal that it wishes for.
Ella, David Frost finally showing the EU we mean business, do you think?
Well, how many times have I said it's come to crunch time? It's been crunch
Yeah, we've
time
all
for
said
so
that.
many years. It feels a tired sentence now. But if the government, I will say, if the government doesn't get Brexit right after the year it's had, and after the claims it made way back in December after the election win of being for the people and for democracy, I don't know what to say for them. They have to get this right. And sovereignty and the ability to make decisions in a country and people in a country is more important than ever, given the backdrop of the pandemic and the unique way in which each country will have to deal with the new normal that we keep talking about. So I'm all eyes on this, and everyone should, even though we might be tired of Brexit, as some might be saying, I'm not. But you need to keep a focus on how this goes, because though it might seem like small things, fishing, vetoing laws, they're trying to play it off as minor differences. There's actually quite crucial decisions being made.
Will we get a deal, Matthew, very quickly?
Oh, good question. I think from memory, the betting markets, the city, I think, is expecting no deal. So I think it's going to be a very close run thing.
You're spending a lot of time looking at betting odds at the moment, aren't you? Very interesting. What can we read out of that, I wonder? Matthew, Ella, thank you both for the moment. Coming up, MPs will receive unconscious bias training and a sexual harassment course from a blue puppet. I'll tell you about that after the break. Welcome back to part two of the press preview. Matthew and Ella still with us. Let's go, Matthew, to the front of the Sunday Times, a story that we both read a little earlier, and I think it resonated a bit, didn't it, with both of us being dads?
Yeah, I think almost any parent. It's a terrific story and a troubling one. And I think any parent during lockdown, during this extremely difficult period, will have given in to the temptation from time to time, possibly even more than that, of giving the iPad or the digital devices to children, because there was a long period where you could only take them out once a day, and they were getting cabin fever. But the problem is, according to this story, and I'm not surprised at all, is many teachers are saying the kids have arrived back in the classroom, as they did last week, and are now struggling desperately to concentrate, that this effect of having been on their devices day in, day out, playing in some cases into the early hours of the morning. They've got twitchy fingers. They're falling asleep at their desks in the early afternoon. Some head teachers say, get them out for a run, get them some fresh air, then get them back into the classroom. But I think there is a fear amongst teachers that the lack of conceptual learning over that period is just going to be amplified by the difficulty they have of getting back into the routine of getting to bed early and concentrating for sustained periods of time in the classroom.
Yeah, we've all got a lot of hard work ahead of us, I think, over the next few weeks. Ella, I'm going to rattle through these because we're running out of time. But tell me about this in the Mail on Sunday. MPs getting anti-bias lessons from a big blue puppet coach.
Yes, so the consultancy that's doing it is called Challenge Consultancy, and it's a lot of money involved. The Mail is picking up on the fact that it's thousands of pounds, going to cost the government thousands of pounds to run these training courses, which involve things like history lessons. I don't know what that means. There's not much detail on that, but certainly discussing things like Black Lives Matter. And then, as it puts it, woke training, which involves talking about things like how to avoid sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, anti-bias training, what words to use, what words not to use. And I think these kind of training programs are bogus and rubbish. What instead you should have
is a bias against them.
I've got a bias against anti-bias training, because I think that they don't do anything positive for making progressive political change. Like, speaking from the position of, talking about women and sexism, there's no real change for women will be made by lecturing MPs on whether or not
Matthew,
what time you should say lady when you shouldn't.
What do you think, Matthew? I mean, surely it's good to challenge ourselves, and if it means that we treat our fellow humans a little bit better after an hour's course or whatever, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I disagree with Ella on this, that unconscious bias, I think, is there's some dispute amongst scientists, but I think it's a real phenomenon. You can see this with very famous studies in the United States and the UK, where if you send CVs to employers who think of themselves as progressive and enlightened and looking for the best candidates, meritocratic, and all of these CVs are identical, except for the name, that some half have archetypal white names and half have archetypal minority names, those with minority names are significantly less likely of being invited to interview. And the employers are often unaware of this bias. There's classic sexism studies of the same kind. My only concern is, what is the evidence that unconscious bias training of the kind that's being purchased by MPs mitigates the biases they're seeking to address? I'd like to see more data on it, because if there isn't good hard data, it's virtue signalling rather than the real achievements.
OK, final thought from you, Ella. I can see you want to jump in.
I think that sexism and racism and all other prejudices should be called out and stopped. And it is the case, as Matthew says, that there are instances when prejudice still exists, and that can be combated. But it is nonsense, I think, to think that sitting in a room and being lectured about what words you should use, what words you shouldn't use, what political campaigns you should support, Black Lives Matter or Me Too or whatever it is, and what ones you shouldn't, isn't the way to go about opening up a kind of free environment in the workplace. Let's remember that MPs are workers. I wouldn't like to be forced by my workplace to do this, and I'd refuse to do it.
Ella, we're going to have to finish it there. Great to see you both. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you soon.